It had been a calamitous voyage. Setting sail for the old world from the mangrove coast in southeastern Lustria, Lord Skrolk and his verminous minions had enlisted the help of Fleetmaster Vrisk and Clan Scurvy's regiments of Blackford Vermarines to cross the Great Ocean. It was an unmitigated disaster. Halfway through the voyage, darkness descended from the heavens, and a maelstrom opened up in front of the fleet, swallowing whole 2 full vessels. Entire legions of diseased zealots were lost to the sea as lightning slashed across the sky and sundered a third. Not a single ship made it out unscathed, but while mutiny may have been in the hearts of every survivor, not a single Skaven dared show it, for the Plague Lord was in a particularly foul mood. Since leaving the storm behind, dozens had already been turned into liquefied puddles in his rage, and the head navigator had been given the kiss of pox by Skrolk himself, chained to the splintered mast far overhead. Even the carrion birds haunting their vessel wouldn't touch its rotting form. Soon, Lord Skrolk would supplant Nurglich and take his rightful place on the Council of 13, but to do that, he would have to replenish his ravaged army and establish a foothold on the mainland. Clan Pestilens is far from their seat of power. Battered and beleaguered, their numberless hordes in tatters and out of their element. But all tunnels lead to the Blighted Marsh, and soon, the Pox Lord will rule over all Skavendom. It's just that the Lords of Decay might need a little persuading first. This is Lord Skrolk's Reclamation of Skavenblight. Border conflict between the Estalians and Bretonnians of Carcassonne had broken out in recent years, as mutual distrust between the 2 human empires festered, then erupted into all-out war, as Morgiana Le Fay lay siege to Bilbali. In the wake of her conquest, the Skaven stronghold beneath the city bid their time, but as Clan Pestilens bears down on the recently ravaged citadel, the opportunity to claim the Great Bronze Bell at its heart and reforge it into a screaming altar for the Great Horned Rat proves too much. The city falls within hours. With a new base of operations and a sprawling nest of already developed tunnels deep beneath the ruins, Lord Skrolk now has the foundation upon which he can build his new empire. A pox cauldron, the ruinous fountains with which the clan rats of Pestilens make their horrifying transformation into plague monks, is brought forth, and will supply the Plague Lord with the zealots his war will require. But back home in Lustria, trouble is brewing, as Teclis, High Lord Master of Hoeth and Warden of the White Tower, moves on the Mangrove Coast. Preparing for this eventuality, Skrolk had summoned Crench, Warlord of Clan Fester, to protect his diseased jungle lairs in his absence. A slave clan of Pestilens, Fester had once been a part of the Council of 13 itself, but the last millennia had not been kind, as rival schemes and dastardly deeds ruined their sterling reputation. Surely, it had had absolutely nothing to do with their own ineptitude. Crench was that most valuable of commodities in the Skaven Under Empire, a chieftain determined and ambitious enough to succeed, but dull-witted enough not to prove a threat to superiors. For one prestigious as the Pope of Plague, it was not difficult to borrow his allegiance, and Crench's assistance would be worth its weight in warpstone. His forces would likely clash with the Azur soon enough. But Teclis struck faster than even Skrolk had anticipated. The swift and powerful navy of the nasty elf things swept in from the sea, blockading the port, and moved on the Skaven stronghold. What he didn't realize was just how entrenched the Thagaraki were. It was true, the rise of the serpent god Sotek had crippled Clan Pestilens' once infinite hordes, but Nurglich's workings in the Under Empire had seen them rise to power once again, solidifying their position as the greatest of the warlord clans. Although Skrolk was of course quick to take credit for that, but to be fair, his pox cauldrons and plague catapults had paved the way for the most vicious ratmen and war machines in recent memory, and it wasn't long before the elves of Ulthuan were feeling their diseased bite. Siege towers wheeled into position as the proud elves prepared to disembark on the walls of the swarming hive city, and Teclis came to the realization that the lizardmen hadn't quite broken the Skaven's hold on the subcontinent all those countless centuries ago. Plague claw catapults, foul contraptions forged in a pact between the engineers of Clan Scryer and the depths of Pestilens, were reaping a terrible toll amongst the Azur, as Obicide the Plague-ridden, a warlike engineer of Clan Scryer, opened the skies as warp lightning rained down from the Immaterium and flensed the flesh from the attackers' bodies. But still they came, determined to kick the Skaven out of Lustria for good. The spearmen pushed further into the rickety favelas of the Hive, swarms collapsed on them from all angles, surrounding them and dragging them down into the muck, and warp bombs, hidden in the bodies of unknowing clan rats, exploded without warning, decimating entire regiments and showering the walls in a torrent of blood. Teclis fought long, and he fought hard, but even with his mastery of the winds of magic, and imbued with the crackling energy of his sword, he could not hope to stop this tide of vermin. The elves would not let this disgrace stand for long, but for now, they would be forced to retreat and leave the Skaven to their plans of world domination. They would return in force soon enough, when their numbers were ready, and when the time was right. Back near the shores of Astolia, the Pope of Pestilens prepares to move on Magritta and expand his already considerable influence on the stricken peninsula. Magritta is the largest and one of the most important settlements in Astolia, but had fallen to Clan Skryre before being reclaimed by the Talaeans. To protect their vital maritime trade, they maintain a strong presence in the southern sea, aggressively patrolling to counter the pirates from Sartosa and levying tribute from trading ships of other nations. On the open sea, even the Vermarines of Clan Scurvy would have stood little chance, but in siege warfare, equipped with the devastating Plague Claw engines, Talaea's mercenary companies would soon be feeling contagion and shroud their city. The cult of Bermidia, dedicated to the worship of the goddess of battle, is located in Magritta, and it was at her famous temple that the Knights of the Blazing Sun were first formed. They would need to pray deeply to her if they were to survive the Bubos battalion sitting on their doorstep, waiting to choke the life from their terrified populace. One of the 9 legendary Plague Lords, and first amongst them, second only to Nurglish himself, Skrolk leads his zealots from the front, a living avatar of disease and corruption, and it was the sight of his master's pestilent perfection that caused Skrolk to claw out his own eyes, as no vision would ever surpass it. But despite the loss of his worldly vision, the Pope of Plague could still see through the warp, and as his monks led the charge into Magritta, he squealed in excitement as their decay began to overwhelm its defenders. From beneath their very feet, the Under Empire rose, ascendant once more, bringing ruin to the Man-Things and a modern echo of ancient Kavzar. Skrolk himself plunged into the thick of the fighting, his rod of corruption dealing death, as the haunting miasma surrounding his rotting form choked the life from the defenders. It was a brutal scene, punctuated by the brutes of Clan Moulder, who routed the Talaeans and ultimately doomed the city. With the fall of Magritta and another blasphemous icon to the Horde One raised towards the shining orb of Morslib, Skrolk is now poised to strike at Skavenblight itself. But the war with the elves isn't over, and Arcstorm, priest of the Pestilent scheme, sails to the Starred Tower to unleash a devastating biological weapon in the bowels of the Citadel. Using his vast knowledge of the Underway, Lord Skrolk and the Zealots of Pestilens lightning strike from Magritta to the nexus of Skavendom, gnawing through passageways long since forgotten and coming to a stop deep beneath the blighted marsh. Years of plotting and treachery have led to this very moment, as rebellion against the Council of 13 erupts from beneath their feet. A civil war for the spiritual and structural bedrock of the Under Empire. A deadly gambit that could lead to the utter ruination of Clan Pestilens, or its complete ascendancy, with Skrolk as its religious and military figurehead. There is no time to waste. Virulent plagues, the likes of which not even the resistant Skaven of the capital can shrug off, decimate the population as Skrolk begins his coup. Now an expert in siege warfare, the Lord of Plague begins battle by ordering a withering bombardment, a terrifying salvo designed not just to weaken their numbers, but their spirits as well. The prospect of being covered in noxious slime and a slow, agonizing death can make even the fiercest albino guard squeamish. If there's one thing the Plague Lord knows, it is the power of psychological warfare. But even as his blessings work their way through the enemy ranks, Skavenblight will not fall without a fight. A sprawling metropolis barely graced by sunlight and nightmare squalor on an unimaginable scale Its belching citadels and truly uncountable garrison would normally be unassailable. But in his genius, Skrolk attacked while the great clans united in a war against the dwarfs of the Karaz Angkor, and with their barracks depleted, the might of Clan Pestilens could be brought fully to bear. Slaves toil away in these dark caverns, never to leave the mines or factories for the whole of their short and miserable lifetimes. But the infamous Scryer district, where so many gave their lives, could perhaps be refurbished as a great citadel of decay. But first, he would have to conquer in melee combat, as his beautiful fanatics climbed the walls of the city, and Clan Eshin waited with blades drawn. As the fortress crumbled under the weight of the artillery barrage, his warriors plunging through the breaches, fierce fighting broke out all across the line. Clan molders, beasts of war, purchased from the breeders of Hellpit, turned against their former masters, painting the walls with their innards. Even Skrolk himself, his bloodlust insatiable, got in on the action as the warriors of Pestilence plunged deeper into the cavern, searching for the Greyseer who led the defense of Skavenblight. It wasn't long before the master of the Liber Bubonicus found his quarry. And so Skavenblight fell, but much work was needed to solidify his position. Wresting control of the city away from its garrison and fully owning it and the beings who live there are two separate things entirely, and as is the backstabbing nature of the Skaven, that struggle would never truly end. But while his plague priests oversaw the creation of a new ruling body dedicated to disease, Skrolk had one last threat to deal with before turning his attention to the surviving Lords of Decay. The Talaeans of Tabaro were gathering in force, an ancient enemy who in 1563, almost 1,000 years ago, had been on the receiving end of a cataclysmic Skaven invasion that saw much of its population dragged away in chains. Only the arrival of the merchant prince Meldo Marcelli and a contingent of High Elf Sea Guard had prevented the complete ruination of the city. But this time, there would be no golden age, no peace or prosperity for the Talaeans. The bells tolled and spelled doom for the peninsula and the humans who lived there. Skrolk would see to that.
Moving, chasing. Law of pestilence. And advance. Yes, yes, yes. Master. Fight them! Slay, kill! Stop, stop! Infect, kill! Fight, seek! Attack! Fight!
With the fall of Tabaro, for the first time in millennia, the peninsula was freed from the grasp of weak-meat man-things, and a new empire was born. Now the Arch-Plague Lord and ruler of Skavendom, Skrolk had become the de facto monarch of the millions of ratmen who called the Underway home. Clan Pestilens catapulted past Eshen, Scryer, Molder, and Moors and into the driver's seat of the Under Empire. A new beginning for the pox rats of Lustria, and an opportunity for Clan Fester and the other slave clans to rise in stature. Skrolk's coup was a successful one, a rebellion that had shaken the very core of an ancient Skaven civilization. But only one thing was certain: the clans of the deposed Lords of Decay would return in force, and should Skrolk's guard slip but once in his 1,000-year reign, the blades of his subordinates would find a home in his back. The treachery and duplicity of the Skaven would always endure.